G'day you mob, Pete here, and this is another episode of Aussie English, the number one place for anyone and everyone wanting to learn Australian English. So today I have a Goss episode for you where I sit down with my old man, my father, Ian Smissen, and we talk about the week's news, whether locally down under here in Australia or non-locally overseas in other parts of the world. Okay, and we sometimes also talk about whatever comes to mind, right? If we can think of something interesting to share with you guys related to us or Australia, we also talk about that in the Goss. So these episodes are specifically designed to try and give you content about many different topics where we're obviously speaking in English and there are multiple people having a natural and spontaneous conversation in English. So it is particularly good to improve your listening skills. In order to complement that though, I really recommend that you join the podcast membership or the academy membership at aussieenglish.com.au, where you will get access to the full transcripts of these episodes, the PDFs, the downloads, and you can also use the online PDF reader to read and listen at the same time. Okay, so if you really, really want to improve your listening skills fast, get the transcript, listen and read at the same time, keep practicing, and that is the quickest way to level up your English. Anyway, I've been rabbiting on a bit, I've been talking a bit. Let's just get into this episode, guys. Smack the bird, and let's get into it. Go for it. All right, so you want to do your story?
Hey, everyone.
You got one that you want to bring up?
I have.
Hope it's a cracker. Hope it's a ripper. Hope it's a beaut.
Belter.
We're 2 beers in, guys, so we've recorded a few of these already. So sorry if we're a little hyperactive.
Hey,
speak for myself. Sorry.
Yeah. He's sorry. I'm not.
Dad gets slow. I get fast.
Yeah, we might as well be hyperactive. It'd be more boring if we were asleep. Don Bradman's first baggy green cap, and we'll explain all of this, sells to Kurt Cobain fan for $450,000. There is a headline that I never thought I would read.
Why does it have to be Kurt Cobain fan?
It becomes obvious when you read the story. So we will pass that and not pass, and we'll explain the different bits. So Don Bradman, firstly, was Australia's greatest ever cricketer. Mm-hmm. The world's greatest ever cricketer.
Almost had an average of 100. Almost.
If you take statistical evidence of people's performance, he is so far and away the best sportsperson who has ever lived. You average a very good, as he was a batsman, a batter in cricket. And we are now supposed to use the term batter, which is perfectly reasonable because there are many women who play the game. And so batsman no longer would, and batswoman sounds stupid. So batter works perfectly. He was the world's best batter at his time. A very good international cricketer has a batting average of about 40. That is, they will make an average of 40 runs every time they go out. And we're not going to go and explain the whole game of cricket. Yeah. So a very good cricketer will be 50. There are a handful, literally 4 or 5 cricketers who have an average of 60. His average is 99.94. So he is 50% better than anybody else who has ever played the game.
Do you think that has to do to some degree with the caliber of bowler back in the day?
Why did nobody else have an average like that?
Of what? Him personally?
During that time. Why did no other batsman have? And in fact, most other batsmen then had lower averages than the best batsman in the world now.
Yeah, it's a very weird thing,
yeah,
right?
He was clearly just so good, it was ridiculous. So he's the sort of icon of Australian sport. He played in the 1920s, 30s and 40s.
There's video of him showing how he used to practice at home using a
golf ball and a cricket stump.
A golf ball and a cricket
stick,
stump
basically,
against a corrugated tin barrel.
It was a water tank.
Water tank. So effectively you have this thing that has these waves of horizontal lines around the tank of iron, a golf ball, which, needless to say is very hard and small, and then he's using a round stick
and hitting it
to hit into the golf ball again and again and again into this tank. And you're like, there are so many round edges here that would send the ball in all sorts of directions, and he's just crushing it, just bang, bang, bang,
it's
bang.
Ridiculous.
Insane.
So that's setting that scene. He is the most famous Australian sportsperson ever. A baggy green cap, which is what the baggy green refers to, is the cap that is given to Australian cricketers when they play for Australia. So when you first get named to play for Australia, you'll get handed a cap. It is not like part of the uniform that you don't get a different one every time you play. You get one. And he actually gave his first one away and was then given a second one. But almost all players only ever have one. So you got players who play 100 matches for Australia over a period of, say, 10 or 15 years, and their baggy green cap is literally falling apart, but they only ever wear one. Unless it completely
and this is why
falls
they're
apart.
nicknamed the baggy greens.
Yeah. And so and obviously he died a long time ago, but this was the cap that he was given first in 1928 when he first played for Australia. It went to auction. And it was passed in. We don't know what price was offered, but the person who bought it was Australian businessman Peter Freedman, who, ironically, are we using a Rode microphone? Yes, we've got Rode things. He is the owner of Rode. He created Rode microphones. So,
crazy.
Great Australian audiovisual company. Thanks, Peter. So he actually purchased the baggy green cap after the auction. So it got passed in at auction. Obviously, they didn't get the price they wanted, but he paid $450,000 for it.
God.
That in itself is fairly amazing. But what is more amazing, I think, is that is less than half of the price paid for another baggy green cap that was sold this year at auction. Shane Warne, who is arguably Australia's best ever bowler in cricket, put his up for auction earlier this year to raise money for the bushfire appeals.
Yeah.
And it was sold for $1,007,500.
Good God.
Just amazing.
Who the hell bought that? Kurt Cobain fan?
No, so we're getting back to Kurt Cobain. Now, the Kurt Cobain line is that Freedman is apparently a big fan of Kurt Cobain, and he paid $9 million at auction for a guitar that had previously been owned by Kurt Cobain. So he is clearly a memorabilia collector that has enough money to buy these things.
More money than you could shake a stick at.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of money.
Or a cricket stump.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I thought that was an interesting one because it's that headline that you just say, what? So, yeah, interesting.
What do you think of people that spend that kind of money on such frivolous crap?
Yeah. Well, I can't speak for what Peter Freedman's going to do it. I don't know Peter, and I can't speak for what... And the article doesn't really talk about it. Although he did say he didn't want this to go to a museum. He wanted it to tour around so people could see it.
Right.
I believe the Bradman Museum, and I could be wrong. I'll click on this later to find it out if I'm wrong. But I believe the Bradman Museum, which is a cricket museum named after Don Bradman, bought the Shane Warne one, or was bought. It was bought by a private citizen who was going to donate it to them. But what they were going to do with it was they were going to tour it around Australia, so people could see it, but B, so they could raise more money. So they were donating $1 million to the cause for the Australian Bushfire Relief Funds, but they were going to raise more money by having it touring around. So actually purchasing it then had a purpose. It wasn't, I'm going to buy it and sit it in my in a safe in my home. They were buying it to A, put it in a museum so people could see it, but B, to raise more money. So interesting idea.
I guess that kind of ties in. We can finish up with my story of the National Library finding a 120-year-old chocolate box.
Yeah.
Commissioned by Queen Victoria and owned by Banjo Paterson.
Banjo Paterson. Who's more famous, Banjo Paterson or Queen Victoria?
Well, I thought you were going to say Don Bradman.
Or Don Bradman. Well, Don Bradman didn't eat chocolate. Well, at least not this chocolate.
In Australia, I would imagine Banjo Paterson. He would
Paterson.
Crap all over Queen Victoria.
Although we live in a state
fame.
named after her. So.
Yeah, funnily enough. Although no one would know, right?
No. Well, it's named after somebody called Victoria. Probably her.
So this was a cool story, and I'll read the sort of first bit from the ABC article here. Conservators at the National Library of Australia have unearthed one of the world's oldest boxes of chocolates dating back 120 years to the time of the Boer War, and that is Boer spelt B-O-E-R, the war that took place in South Africa.
Or B-O-R-E.
No, it's not boring, and it's not a pig. The souvenir chocolate tin was discovered at the bottom of a box of personal papers from the estate of Australian bush poet Andrew Barton Banjo Paterson, Remarkably, the chocolates were not only unmolested after more than a
I
century.
how you molest chocolate.
Well, it's funny how we use that phrase to mean like to molest someone is obviously to, I guess, effectively rape. Usually used in young children
to injure them in some way.
Molest children, but then it can be used to if you molest something like an animal. It's not necessarily a sexual thing. It's more like you've just irritated it, disturbed it. Touched it, moved it.
I think the word actually comes from something. It actually means to eat it, but it actually means it's reasonable here. But
anyway, so remarkably, the chocolates were not only unmolested after more than a century, but still looked almost good enough to eat. Yeah, I don't know. I saw the photo.
Did they try it? I didn't get down to the bottom of the story before we got here.
The chocolate bar marked into 6 fingers still had remnants of old straw packing and silver foil wrapping. And the discovery astonished staff at the library's conservation lab, who weren't expecting to find Banjo's sweets hidden amongst a career's worth of poetry, diaries, and newspaper clippings. So apparently what had happened was that all of these documents and everything else in Banjo's estate had been handed down from family member to family member, because I think Banjo died in 1941. 1941. Yeah. And it was only last year, I think, that it was handed in to a museum, and they were like, you can keep these, you can use these.
Do what you want.
Yeah, and it included the photo that is of him, and I was thinking, where's my wallet? But I don't have a $10 note. His photo on the $10 note. He's the guy wearing the hat on the blue Australian $10 note. That's Andrew Banjo Paterson. So... yeah, I thought it was a really cool story. They went through, and there was an interesting part of it where there was a bit of a conflict, apparently, with Queen Elizabeth wanting to commission something like 70 to 80,000 boxes of chocolates to send over to South Africa to support the troops who were fighting in the Boer War against I guess they were South Africans, but they were the Dutch colonizers of South Africa that they were fighting against, the Afrikaans. And so she had harassed Cadbury. She'd asked Cadbury to do it, but Cadbury were considering themselves at the time to be pacifists.
Yeah, so they didn't want their chocolate
and they
sent to the war.
They refused initially to stamp the chocolate and the boxes with Cadbury, but then eventually capitulated. They gave in. The interesting thing was Banjo Paterson wasn't a soldier in the Boer War. He went over there as a war correspondent in
journalist,
1900 for I've got it here somewhere. Who was it? The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald.
Yes. That both still exist.
Both still exist, yeah. You can read those newspapers today. So he used to write for them.
He did.
120 years ago. And the cool thing was that they had some information in that article about Canadian soldiers having written in their diary that they were getting offered a lot of money for these chocolates. Lots of people wanted them and wanted to buy them because they obviously commemorated their time in South Africa at this war. And Banjo Paterson, clearly whilst over there, obviously hawked or bought one of these boxes. They were going for like £5 to £10, which must have been, hundreds of bucks.
Yeah.
I imagine, for these tins. And he never tucked into it. He never ate it. He just put it away and saved it.
Obviously Queen Victoria decided
eat the freaking chocolate.
But
it's no
Queen
good to us
Victoria
now.
decided that she wanted to send these as a way of providing food for, and chocolate was always a really good food in these circumstances to send because it lasts for a long time. It's very difficult to destroy. Yes. So it's not fragile and doesn't go off in terms of getting bacteria and so on. So they sent this chocolate over for the troops to eat, but clearly there became this black market in selling it. That was more valuable than actually eating it. So.
How much was £5 in 1900? What's that worth today? Let's see if we can work that out.
$1,000.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? So
that's a guess.
Whoa, holy crap. Okay, so £100 in 1900 is the equivalent to £12,000 today, which is probably about $20,000 Australian. So £5, 1/20th of that, $1,000. Boom.
Touchdown. Goal. Two mixed sporting metaphors.
That is crazy. Yeah. So that is a box of chocolates that at the time was bought on the black market for clearly a lot more than it was worth.
Yes.
But did you want to talk a little bit about the Boer War and what it was, why it was taking
My
place.
grandfather served in the Boer War.
Exactly. And you can tell that
One of my
story on here
grandfathers
too,
did.
because I think he was the one that you gave me to take to history class in year 11, year 12.
Yeah.
Tell that story. Sing us a song,
This
Dad.
is a long story. One of my grandfathers, my father's father, whom I never knew, he died when I was 2 years old, and he was in England and I was in Australia. So
And your father was
my
estranged
father
from
was
his
estranged
family.
from them, and he probably never knew I existed. So
No.
all of that aside, he
he existed.
I
so-
do, yes. He was a minister in the Congregational Church of Scotland and then moved to England. But during the Boer War, in about 1900, this is even before he became a minister. He didn't become a minister until 1908.
So after he got back.
Yeah, but he served not directly in the war, but I think he worked with the YMCA in the recovery and recuperation of soldiers. So the soldiers are on the front fighting. When they came back, the YMCA were one of the organisations that were providing not medical services, but rest and recuperation. So they were feeding them, looking after them, giving them things to do, and so on.
What does it stand for again? YMCA.
Young Men's Christian Association.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So this is just one of these things all over the world, huh?
Yeah, and so he served with them for a while in the Boer War. Then he became a minister in 1908, and in the First World War, by the time the First World War had started, he was again working with the YMCA in France and doing the same sort of things. And then he joined up in the end of 1915, early 1916, joined up and became a padre, a minister in the army. And yes, comes from father.
Is that Latin?
I think it is, yeah.
I imagine originally.
And yeah, so he was there and served for the rest of the war. Got injured twice.
He was the guy that was running out and saving people, right?
Two,
planting flags next to
awarded 2 military
injured
crosses,
people.
which was the second highest award that a officer lower than major, I think, can be awarded in the army for. Yeah, and the second one that he got was the citation was more obvious. The first one was sort of did good stuff in battle, but the second one specifically mentioned that he was out in no man's land marking the sites of men who were injured so that the medical teams could come out and get them. So he was ahead of the medical teams in no man's land while the battle was going on, putting white flags next to men who were injured.
Do you think it was given a pass by the enemy? Like they would see this guy's just clearly not a threat and he's trying to save people?
Who
or
knows?
They would just...
I think there is a bit of that. And I'll remind me if I don't get to it, but there's a great little story related to that in some of his writings that I've got. But I think there's part of that if you're wearing either a cross on you, as in a medical cross, or you're wearing a religious thing, then I think there would be plenty of soldiers who would go, "Don't shoot them."
Bali.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, the story about the interesting part of that is he tells a story of right near the end of the war, because he was still there serving right near the end of the war. He was working with a German doctor, and this is by the time effectively in the place they were, the war had effectively ended. It hadn't been, the armistice hadn't been declared, but clearly the Germans there had given up. And
the Dutch, there were Germans there as well, were there?
Well, the Germans there were fighting against. No, the Germans were fighting against the British, and the Germans had basically given up at that stage. And he was, as a minister, was out working with injured men from both sides, and this German doctor was working with them. And apparently, the German doctor said, "One day, I hope people realise that we can get along."
Yeah.
And he said that didn't change his life, but he just said, here's somebody that he and his countrymen had been fighting for nearly 5 years, for 4.5 years. And so right at the end, this German doctor has just said, here's hoping that this is a signal that we can get along.
It reminds me of the story that I heard about the World War One Gallipoli Christmas party.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was apparently quite common even on the Western Front in France and Belgium.
Do you want to tell those stories that idea?
On
the Christmas truce.
The Christmas truce. Christmas Day, both the Allies and the opposition, the Germans, and the Turks in the case of Gallipoli, stopped fighting and sang Christmas carols together and threw food to each other and then next day they started shooting at each other again. But it was almost like this, it's Christmas Day, let's stop trying to kill each other. And
I can't imagine how much...
It's not like they all sat down and started drinking together, and but they just recognised, and because the trenches were so close together, they could just call out to each other.
Yeah. You wonder who was the first person to try and suggest that and be like, I've got this idea. Listen to me. Yeah, wait. Just wait. You'll get there.
You'll get there.
Yeah, so what does it say here on Wikipedia? The truce occurred only 5 months into the war. Hostilities had lulled as leadership on both sides reconsidered their strategies following the stalemate of the race to the sea and the indecisive result of the First Battle of Ypres.
Ypres.
Yeah.
In France.
In the week leading up to 25th December, French, German and British soldiers crossed trenches to exchange seasonal greetings and talk.
Yeah. And apparently that happened at other times as well, where they would just sing Christmas carols to each other. Some in English, some in German. And of course, they're the same carols. They're the same tunes. Songs. And they'd be singing them in German and English. And humanity is weird. Yeah,
well, I was about to say just how much humanity that goes to show that these people still had, despite obviously also committing insane atrocities against one another, whether or not, war crimes, but just literally killing one another in mud.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just crazy. Anything to finish up this episode with, Dad?
No, I've sort of run out. We've done about 5 or 6 episodes now, and I've run out of beer.
Yeah, true.
We're done.
We should probably finish up. But thank you for joining us, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Alrighty, you mob, thank you so much for listening to or watching this episode of The Goss. If you would like to watch the video, if you're currently listening to it and not watching it, you can do so on the Aussie English TV channel on YouTube. This is different from the main channel. You'll be able to subscribe to that. Just search Aussie English TV on YouTube. And if you're watching this and not listening to it, you can check this episode out also on the Aussie English podcast, which you can find via my free Aussie English podcast application on both Android and iPhone. You can download that for free, or you can find it via any other good podcast app that you've got on your phone. Spotify, podcasts from iTunes, Stitcher, whatever it is. I'm your host, Pete. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a ripper of a day, and I will see you next time. Peace.